They left her bound in the mud for being cursed. A Cherokee hunter who found her made them regret it. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's tale. The air was thick with tension as the night sky cast an eerie glow over the small, forgotten valley. The moon hung low, its pale light reflecting off the muddy ground, where a young woman lay, bound and discarded like an unwanted animal. Her breath was shallow, each inhale a struggle against the weight of her exhaustion, and her body was covered in dirt and bruises from the brutal treatment she had endured. The tribe that had abandoned her had cursed her, branding her with the label of misfortune after a string of bad luck had befallen them. But what they didn't know was that their mistake would be their undoing. As the wind howled through the trees, she lay there in the cold, hopelessness creeping into her thoughts. She had been left to die, but death had yet to claim her. Her hands trembled as she tested the strength of the ropes that held her to the ground. There was no one to help her, no one who cared. Or so she thought. Meanwhile, in the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows. The Cherokee hunter, known only as Redstone, moved with the quiet grace of someone who had walked these lands for years, hunting both game and the souls of those who threatened the peace of his people. He had been tracking the trail of those who had done this to her, a path marked by cruelty and malice. As he neared the clearing where she lay, he could see her, the pale figure almost lost in the dark. The hunter's heart clenched at the sight. He had seen many horrors in his time, but there was something about this woman, lying helpless and abandoned, that stirred something deep within him. She wasn't just a victim of fate, she was someone's daughter, someone's sister, and someone who deserved better than this. With a swift motion, Redstone approached her, his hands steady as he cut through the ropes that bound her. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion and fear clouding her gaze. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" Redstone's reply was simple. "I'm here to protect you." With a gentle hand, he helped her sit up, supporting her weight as she leaned against him. She didn't understand what was happening, but the warmth of his presence gave her a fleeting sense of safety. He had no idea who she was or why she had been left to die, but one thing was certain. He would not allow her to perish at the hands of those who thought her cursed. The Cherokee hunter, his name now spoken in a soft murmur between them, knew that no one deserved to be treated this way. He would take her back to his people, where she would be safe, and where justice would be served to those who had wronged her. As the hunter carefully lifted her in his arms, the sound of distant voices echoed through the valley, the men who had cursed her drawing closer. They had no idea what was about to unfold. They thought they had broken her, but in truth, they had only awakened the wrath of someone far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. The hunter's steps were firm and sure, each movement a promise that she would be protected, and those who had abandoned her would regret it before the night was over. The cold wind howled through the trees as Redstone carefully carried the woman, his arms strong but gentle around her fragile frame. Her head rested against his shoulder, her body shivering despite the warmth of his presence. She was weak, exhausted, and every movement seemed to take more effort than she could muster, but she was alive. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to feel the faintest stirrings of hope. Redstone's sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, always alert, always watching. He was a man of the land, a hunter, and nothing escaped his attention. The sound of distant voices reached his ears, and his instincts told him that danger was still close by. The men who had abandoned her were not far behind. He had to get her to safety, and quickly. As they moved through the dense forest, the woman, her voice weak but steady, asked, "Who are they? Why did they do this to me?" Redstone didn't answer right away, his mind focused on the path ahead. He wasn't sure who the men were, but he knew they were bad men, men who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. He could feel the anger rising in him as he thought about the cruelty they had shown her. He glanced down at the woman in his arms. Her face, bruised and battered, was still beautiful in its quiet resilience. "They are nothing," Redstone said finally, his voice low and full of conviction. They are weak men, driven by fear. But they have made a grave mistake. She looked up at him, confusion in her eyes. A mistake? Yes, he replied, his grip tightening around her as they made their way deeper into the woods. They left you to die, but they did not know that you are not cursed. You are strong. And now, you belong to my people. And we will make them regret what they have done. She was silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I don't know if I can face them again, she whispered. Redstone stopped and looked down at her. His eyes were intense, unwavering. You don't have to face them alone, he said firmly. We will protect you. You are safe with us. The woman nodded, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Redstone could feel the shift in her. She was beginning to trust him, beginning to believe in the promise of protection he had made. He turned back toward the path, knowing that there was still much to be done. They would reach his camp by nightfall, where the rest of his people would offer her the safety and healing she needed. As they continued through the forest, Redstone's mind raced with thoughts of what would come next. The tribe would welcome her, of that he was sure. But what would she want once she was safe? Would she choose to stay with them, or would she want to leave? He didn't know the answers, but he did know one thing. She would never be alone again. They finally arrived at his camp. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the flames of the fire flickered in the cool evening air, casting long shadows across the clearing. Redstone gently lowered the woman to the ground, where a group of his fellow tribesmen gathered to greet them. Their faces were somber, but their eyes were filled with a quiet strength. They had all heard the stories, knew what had happened, and now they were ready to help. Redstone's voice rang out across the camp as he addressed them. This woman is under our protection, he said, his tone commanding. No one will harm her again. We will make sure those who left her will feel the weight of their actions. The tribe nodded in unison, their resolve clear. The woman, still weak but now more alert, watched them all. She had no idea what her future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. She was not cursed. She was not alone. And, perhaps most importantly, she was no longer a victim. She was a part of something greater. The fire crackled in the night, and as Redstone took a seat beside her, he looked out over the camp. The journey ahead would be long, but they would face it together. The woman had been given a second chance at life, and now it was time for her to find out what it meant to truly live. The night passed quietly at the camp, the crackling of the fire the only sound that accompanied the stars hanging high above them. Redstone sat close by the fire, keeping a watchful eye on the woman who had now been settled under the protection of the Cherokee tribe. She had been given food and a blanket, but her eyes remained distant, as if haunted by memories too dark to forget. Redstone understood that healing would not come quickly, but he had seen it before. His people knew what it was like to be broken, and they also knew how to help one another rebuild. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Redstone rose quietly, stretching his legs before walking toward the edge of the camp. His mind was heavy with thoughts. The men who had abandoned the woman were still out there. They would come back. He knew that for certain. The question was, how? Would they handle it? Would they try to kill her once more, or would they beg for mercy? The answer didn't matter to him. What mattered was the protection of his people, and this woman had now become part of that. Redstone's thoughts were interrupted when he heard the faint rustling of movement behind him. Turning, he saw the woman standing at the edge of the camp, her figure silhouetted against the rising sun. Her face was set with a new determination, her earlier vulnerability now replaced by something stronger. You are awake early, Redstone remarked softly, walking toward her. She didn't respond immediately, her eyes scanning the camp as if taking everything in for the first time. I couldn't sleep, she finally said. Her voice was stronger now, though tinged with exhaustion. I'm not used to peace. Redstone nodded, understanding more than she realized. It takes time, he said, his voice calm. The past may always follow you, but here, you are safe. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. I'm not sure I can accept that, she said quietly. I've been running my whole life. Running from people, from situations, from myself. Now, you're telling me I can stop running. Redstone's gaze softened, and he stepped closer. Here, you don't have to run anymore. We protect our own. And you are one of us now. She met his eyes, searching for something, perhaps the truth in his words. She found it, and after a long moment, she nodded slowly. Thank you, she whispered. Redstone didn't respond, but the sincerity in his gaze told her everything she needed to know. He turned to head back to the campfire, motioning for her to follow. "There is much we must discuss," he said. "You are safe here, but there is still much danger ahead." They sat by the fire, the warmth from the flames mingling with the cool morning air. Redstone explained the ways of his people, the customs and traditions that had kept them strong for centuries. He told her of the threats they faced, not just from the men who had abandoned her, but from others who sought to destroy their way of life. As he spoke, she listened intently, her face showing a mix of understanding and unease. When Redstone finished, he turned to her. "You must decide, now, what you want from this life. You are free to leave if you wish, but if you stay, you will fight beside us, just as we fight for you." The woman's eyes darkened with uncertainty. She had never felt like she had a choice before. For the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of freedom. She could stay, find peace, and fight for something worth living for. Or she could leave, wander alone again. "I don't know if I can fight," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I've never had to fight for anything before." Redstone's gaze hardened slightly, but there was no judgment in his eyes. "You don't have to fight for everything. Sometimes, you fight to protect what matters most." She sat in silence for a moment, her thoughts racing. Redstone was right. She didn't have to fight for everything, but she had to fight for herself. She had to fight for her place in this world. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a victim anymore. She felt like someone worth protecting. "I will stay," she said, her voice strong now. Redstone smiled slightly. "Good," he replied. "Then welcome to the tribe. Together, we fight. Together, we survive." She nodded, the weight of her decision settling in her chest. As the fire burned low and the first rays of the sun warmed the earth, she felt something shift within her. This was her chance to be free, to live without fear, and to fight for a future worth living. The past would always be with her, but it would no longer define her. She was no longer just a victim. She was a warrior now, with a tribe that would stand beside her, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The following days at the camp passed in a quiet rhythm, as Redstone and the woman, now known as Aiyana, began to adjust to their new reality. Redstone had introduced her to his people, who greeted her with the same cautious respect they gave all newcomers. Aiyana had been given a place to sleep by the fire, food to eat, and time to rest. The men and women of the tribe, though kind, were still wary of her presence. The bond between them had not yet been formed. Aiyana had come from a world of cruelty, a world where people used others for their own gain, and though she had been welcomed into this camp, the scars of her past were not so easily erased. She spent most of her days by the fire, watching the tribe's daily activities, learning their ways and customs. Her initial fear and confusion slowly began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of belonging. She had begun to understand the depth of Redstone's words. Here, she was not just a victim, she was part of something. The tribe was small, but strong. They survived in a land that was unforgiving, where only the strongest could thrive. It was the kind of life Aiyana had never known, but it was also the kind of life she had come to crave. Redstone, meanwhile, kept a close eye on her, his protective instincts never far from the surface. He knew the others in the tribe still had questions about her, and some of them, especially the older warriors, felt uneasy about a woman from another world joining them. But Redstone was steadfast. She was his responsibility now, and no one would harm her while he was around. As the days passed, Aiyana began to train with the women of the tribe. They taught her how to use a bow and arrow, how to track animals, and how to survive in the wilderness. Though it was hard for her at first, she quickly found that she had a natural talent for the bow. The skill, once learned, came to her with ease, and soon she was as proficient as some of the younger hunters. The tribe took notice of this, and while they were still hesitant to fully accept her, they began to see her potential. Aiyana was not just a woman to be protected, she was a warrior in her own right. Redstone spent hours with her, teaching her the ways of his people, and the two of them grew closer as they spent time together. His calm demeanor and steady presence were a balm to Aiyana's soul, and she began to feel a connection to him that went beyond gratitude. She had been broken when he found her, but in his care, she began to heal. But it wasn't just Redstone who saw her transformation. The tribe, too, began to notice the strength she was finding within herself. She had been a victim of circumstance, but now she was becoming a part of their world, a world that prized strength and survival above all else. Aiyana's acceptance into the tribe was not instant, but it was inevitable. The warriors, who had once doubted her, began to watch her with a new respect. They saw that she was not just a fragile woman. She was a force to be reckoned with. But that respect came with a price. The men who had abandoned her were not finished with her. They had not forgotten the betrayal, nor had they forgiven the woman who had escaped their grasp. Word had reached them of her survival, and soon they would come for her again. The question was no longer if they would find her, but when. Redstone was ready for them. He had been preparing for this day since the moment he found Aiyana. The tribe had been making plans for a defense, and when the time came, they would stand together. No one would take Aiyana from them again. Redstone had already warned Aiyana that her past would not leave her easily, and the reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. She had been running for so long, and now that she had found a place to rest, to heal, the shadow of her past still hung over her. But there was no running anymore. She had a family now, a tribe that would fight for her, and a warrior at her side who would never let anyone hurt her again. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the valley, Redstone found Aiyana sitting by the fire, her bow resting beside her. She looked up at him as he approached, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "What happens next?" she asked softly, her voice steady, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. Redstone sat beside her, his gaze steady. "We wait, and when they come, we fight." Aiyana nodded slowly, her hand reaching for the bow beside her. "I'm ready," she said quietly. Redstone placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "You've already proven that you are," he said. And with that, they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them, knowing that the storm was coming, but they would face it together. The sun had just begun to rise the following morning, casting a warm, golden light over the camp as Redstone prepared himself for the inevitable confrontation. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what was to come hanging over everyone in the tribe. Aiyana had been up before the dawn, as she had been every morning since her arrival. She was no longer the frightened woman who had stumbled into camp days ago. Now, she was strong, focused, and determined. The lessons of survival that the tribe had taught her were already taking root, and the bow she now carried was no longer just a symbol of protection. It was a weapon she was ready to use. As Redstone finished gathering his gear, he saw her standing by the fire, the orange glow of the flames illuminating her face. She had her bow strung and ready, her eyes scanning the horizon with a calmness that reminded him of a seasoned warrior. "You're ready," he said quietly, approaching her. Aiyana nodded, her face set in determination. "I've been ready for this," she replied. "It's been a long time coming." Redstone studied her for a moment, seeing the change in her. The fear that had once clouded her eyes was now replaced with a quiet confidence. She had been through hell, but now she was part of something stronger than her past. She was part of this tribe, and she was ready to fight for it. "They'll come for you," Redstone said, his voice low. "But you won't be alone." She looked up at him, her gaze steady. "I know." She took a deep breath, her grip tightening on her bow. "I'm not running anymore." Redstone smiled slightly, proud of her. "That's good, because we fight as one." They both turned toward the campfire, where the rest of the tribe had gathered, ready for the upcoming battle. The warriors, young and old, were preparing their weapons, their faces grim but resolute. The women were making final preparations, gathering supplies, and offering words of encouragement. There was a sense of unity in the air, a shared understanding that this was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for their way of life. As the hours passed, the tribe continued its preparations. The sun was high in the sky when the sound of hooves broke the stillness of the valley. Redstone's eyes narrowed, and he motioned for the tribe to fall silent. The enemy was here. The men who had left Aiyana to die were not alone. They had brought reinforcements, but it wouldn't matter. The Cherokee were ready. The battle began as soon as the first rider entered the clearing. The sound of arrows flying through the air mixed with the war cries of the Cherokee as they charged into battle. Aiyana stood beside Redstone, her bow drawn, her eyes locked on the approaching enemies. She had no time to hesitate, no time to second-guess herself. She was part of this tribe, and she would fight for them as fiercely as they had fought for her. The first arrow she loosed found its mark, striking one of the riders in the chest. The man fell from his horse, his cries echoing through the valley. Aiyana's heart pounded in her chest, but there was no time to dwell on it. She fired another arrow, taking down another rider. Her movements were fluid, instinctive, each shot a testament to the training she had received in such a short time. Redstone fought beside her, his presence a reassuring force. They were a team now, moving as one, their strength greater together than it ever could have been apart. The enemy began to retreat, but they were not ready to give up so easily. Redstone shouted orders to his tribe, rallying them to continue the fight. Aiyana moved through the chaos, her focus unshakable, her bow an extension of herself. The battle raged on, but the tide had already turned. The Cherokee had the advantage. Finally, the remaining enemy riders turned and fled, their numbers too few to face the strength and unity of the Cherokee tribe. The battle was won. The camp fell silent as the last of the enemies disappeared into the distance. Redstone stood tall, his breath steady, surveying the scene. Aiyana lowered her bow, her heart still racing. She had done it. She had fought, and she had won. She looked at Redstone, who met her gaze with a proud smile. "You fought well," he said, his voice low but filled with respect. Aiyana nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I fought for something worth fighting for," she replied. Redstone's smile widened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You fought for us," he said, "and now, you're one of us." Aiyana looked around at the tribe, her tribe. They had accepted her, trained her, and fought beside her. She had found a new family, one that would stand with her no matter what. The past was behind her now, and the future stretched out before her, a future where she would no longer be a victim, but a warrior. As the sun set behind the mountains, the tribe gathered around the fire, their voices rising in song. Aiyana sat among them, her heart light for the first time in years. She had found her place, and she would never have to run again. The victory over the enemy riders was more than just a battle won. It was a moment of transformation for Aiyana. The days that followed were filled with quiet celebration, but underneath the surface, there was a palpable sense of change. The tribe had been through many hardships before, but they had never faced anything quite like this. Aiyana had proven herself, not only to the tribe but to herself. She had fought for survival, for her place, and for a future she had never imagined. Yet, as the days passed, the shadow of the past still lingered. The men who had once left her to die had not forgotten her. It wasn't just their desire for revenge that threatened her. It was their belief that she could never truly escape their grasp, that they would always have control over her. Redstone had warned her of this, but Aiyana didn't need to be told again. She knew that the moment she started to feel safe, she would have to fight once more. The mornings at the camp were spent in preparation. The tribe knew the men would return, and they were ready. Redstone, always calm and calculated, ensured that every warrior was prepared. He taught Aiyana how to move with purpose, how to track their enemies without leaving a trace. Her skill with a bow had grown, but Redstone knew that she would need more than just her archery skills to survive the fight ahead. He spent hours teaching her the art of stealth, of survival in the wild, and most importantly, the art of patience. It wasn't about strength alone. It was about outsmarting the enemy, about knowing when to strike and when to wait. The fight isn't always won by the strongest, Redstone would say, his eyes sharp as he spoke. It's won by the one who understands when to move and when to stand still. Aiyana listened, absorbing his lessons as though they were life itself. She had once believed that she was weak, that she was nothing more than a victim of the cruel fate that had been dealt to her. But now, she felt different. She felt strong, capable of something more. She had been broken once, but the pieces had come together in a way that made her even more formidable. Her past, though painful, had forged her into something new, something she could be proud of. A few days after the battle, Redstone gathered the tribe together. There was a tension in the air, a sense that something was coming. The warriors stood at attention, their faces grim but resolute. "They will come soon," Redstone said, his voice low but firm. "But this time, we won't just fight to survive. This time, we fight to protect everything we have." Aiyana stood at the edge of the group, her hand resting on the bow strapped to her back. She felt the weight of Redstone's words, and though the fear still lingered in her chest, there was something else there now. Determination. She would not let her past dictate her future. She would fight. The following days were spent preparing, each member of the tribe readying themselves for the inevitable clash. Aiyana trained harder than ever before, her movements swift and precise. The tribe had become her family, and she would protect them with everything she had. She knew that she was no longer just fighting for her own survival. She was fighting for them, her people, her new family. On the evening before the final confrontation, Aiyana found herself alone by the fire. The crackling flames cast shadows on the ground as she sat, deep in thought. The reality of the situation settled over her like a heavy cloak. Tomorrow would be the day. Tomorrow, they would face the men who had once tried to destroy her. Aiyana's fingers brushed the arrows at her side, feeling the smooth wood and sharp points. She wasn't just ready to fight. She was ready to win. Redstone approached her quietly, sitting down beside her. "Are you prepared?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with a depth that only someone who had lived through so many battles could possess. Aiyana nodded, her eyes meeting his. "I am," she said firmly. "I know what I have to do." Redstone studied her for a moment before speaking again. "You've come a long way, Aiyana. But tomorrow, we fight as one. No one fights alone." Aiyana smiled, the weight of his words settling deep within her heart. She wasn't alone. She never would be again. The next day, as the sun rose high in the sky, the sound of hooves echoed through the valley. Redstone stood at the front of the tribe, his eyes scanning the horizon. The men who had tried to destroy Aiyana were here, but they were no longer the threat they had once been. Redstone's voice rang out across the camp, rallying the warriors. "Today, we stand together. Today, we show them what it means to mess with the Cherokee." Aiyana stood tall beside him, her bow in hand, her resolve unwavering. She had come to this tribe broken and lost, but now she was ready to face her past. She had a family, and she would fight for them with everything she had. The battle began as the enemy rode into view. The sky seemed to darken, the wind picking up as the two forces clashed. The sounds of war cries and arrows filled the air, but through it all, Aiyana moved with precision and purpose. She fought not just for her survival, but for the tribe that had given her a second chance. As the battle raged on, Aiyana could feel the weight of her journey, the strength she had gained. She was no longer the woman left to die in the mud. She was a warrior, and she would not be defeated. The battle had ended as quickly as it had begun. The sound of hooves and arrows faded into the distance, leaving behind only the echoes of a hard-fought victory. Aiyana stood among the tribe, her heart racing, but there was no time to rest. The dust had barely settled before Redstone called for a gathering, his voice firm and commanding. Aiyana's eyes scanned the battlefield, seeing the fallen enemies who had once thought her an easy target, and feeling the weight of the victory they had just achieved. It wasn't just her battle, it was the tribe's battle, and they had fought together. As she turned to face Redstone, their eyes met for a brief moment, a silent understanding passing between them. She had proven herself in the fight, but more than that, she had earned her place among the tribe. Redstone gave her a subtle nod, acknowledging her strength. "You've done more than survive," he said, his voice carrying a deep respect. "You fought like one of us." Aiyana didn't respond immediately, her thoughts still lingering on the battle. She had fought for her survival, yes, but she had fought for something more. She had fought for her new family, the tribe that had taken her in, and the land they called home. As the tribe gathered around the fire that night, the atmosphere was different. There was no more fear, no more uncertainty. The enemy had been repelled, and the tribe had emerged victorious. But the victory felt different now. It felt earned, and it felt like the beginning of something new. The men and women of the tribe exchanged quiet words of praise and respect, and Aiyana was no longer the outsider she had once been. She had fought beside them, and they had fought for her. The bond between them had been forged in battle, and now it was unbreakable. Aiyana sat by the fire, her fingers tracing the smooth wood of her bow. The flames danced before her, casting flickering shadows on the ground. She felt a sense of peace, a sense of belonging, for the first time in a long while. But as the fire crackled and the tribe celebrated, a thought lingered in the back of her mind. The men who had attacked her were not gone for good. They would regroup, and they would come again. The peace they had fought for was fragile, and Aiyana knew the fight was far from over. As the night wore on, Redstone approached her, his face serious. "We've won today," he said quietly. "But the war is not over. They will be back, and we will be ready." Aiyana looked up at him, her expression hardening. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice steady. "I won't let them take this from us." Redstone nodded. "Good. We fight together, always. That is the way of our people." The next day, the tribe continued its preparations, reinforcing their defenses and ensuring that everyone was ready for the next attack. Aiyana was no longer just a learner. She was a warrior, and her training had prepared her for whatever lay ahead. She practiced daily, her skill with the bow growing stronger, her confidence in herself rising with each passing hour. But it wasn't just the physical skills that she honed. Aiyana learned to read the land, to understand the signs of the world around her, just as Redstone had taught her. She became more attuned to the rhythms of nature, more aware of the movements of her enemies, and more connected to the land that now claimed her as its own. As the days passed, the tension in the air grew thicker. Redstone kept a sharp eye on the horizon, knowing that the enemy would not rest. But Aiyana no longer felt the same fear she had once carried. She had found her strength, and with it, a sense of purpose. She was no longer running from her past. She was standing firm in the present, ready to face whatever the future held. The tribe had become her family, and she would protect them with everything she had. One morning, as Redstone and Aiyana stood by the edge of the camp, watching the sun rise over the mountains, Aiyana spoke. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice calm but full of resolve. Redstone glanced at her, his eyes serious. "Now we wait. We prepare. And when they come, we fight." Aiyana nodded, her grip on her bow tightening. She knew the enemy would return. They always did. But this time, she would be ready. The battle for survival was far from over, but she was no longer the woman who had been left to die. She was a warrior, and she would stand tall beside her tribe, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The winds of change had swept through the camp, and Aiyana had found her place. No longer a victim of her past, she had become the protector of her future. As the days grew darker and the enemy loomed on the horizon, Aiyana stood with her tribe, unyielding and unafraid. The fight was just beginning, but she knew one thing for certain: they would face it together. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure of the inevitable attack hung heavy in the air. Redstone had kept the tribe's focus sharp, pushing them to strengthen their defenses and train with renewed vigor. Aiyana, now fully immersed in the life of the tribe, had become an invaluable member. Her skills with the bow were unmatched, but it was her quiet strength and ability to read the land that truly set her apart. She no longer hesitated, no longer doubted her place among these people. Her transformation was complete. She was a warrior, standing alongside the men and women who had fought for generations to protect their way of life. One evening, as the camp settled into its usual calm, Aiyana sat with Redstone by the fire. The flames flickered, casting shadows on the ground as they spoke of the future. The moment of battle was drawing near, and both knew that it would not be easy. "They will not stop," Redstone said, his voice low, his gaze fixed on the flames. "They will keep coming until they take what they want. But we will not let them." Aiyana nodded, her fingers wrapped around the string of her bow. "I'm not afraid," she said, her voice steady. "I've fought for my life before, and I'll fight for this land now. We are stronger than they think." Redstone looked at her, his eyes proud. "You have come a long way, Aiyana. You've proven yourself. But remember, it is not just strength that will win this fight. It is unity. We fight as one, and we protect each other. That is the way of the Cherokee." Aiyana took a deep breath, absorbing his words. She had learned quickly that their strength was in their bond, in the unity that tied them together as a people. It was that unity that would carry them through whatever came next. As the days passed, Aiyana found herself preparing for the battle in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just physical training. It was a deeper, more internal preparation. She spent hours walking the land, connecting with the earth in a way she hadn't done before. She felt the pulse of the forest, the rhythm of the rivers, and the strength of the mountains. It was as if the land itself was telling her that she was ready. She wasn't just defending a tribe. She was defending a way of life that was tied to the very soul of the earth. The enemy would come again, and when they did, they would face something they hadn't anticipated. They would face the full might of a tribe united, not just in strength, but in spirit. The night before the battle, Aiyana stood alone on the edge of the camp, looking out over the valley. The moon was high, and the stars were bright against the endless sky. For a moment, she allowed herself to reflect on how far she had come. She had been alone, lost in a world that had offered her no place. Now, she had found that place, and it was a place worth fighting for. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the future of this land, for the people who had given her a second chance. A sound from behind her broke her thoughts. She turned to see Redstone standing at a distance, watching her. "You ready?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Aiyana smiled and nodded, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "I've always been ready." Redstone stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Tomorrow, we fight," he said, his hand resting on her shoulder. "But tonight, we rest. We are stronger when we fight together. Never forget that." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Aiyana felt them settle deep within her, a reminder that she was never alone in this fight. She wasn't just part of the tribe's future. She was part of its past, its present, and its future. The morning of the battle dawned gray and cold. The enemy had arrived, their numbers larger than before, but their arrogance was their downfall. The Cherokee had prepared, and they stood ready. Redstone and Aiyana led the charge, their arrows flying as they moved through the forest with a precision that spoke of years of training. The battle was fierce, but the tribe fought with a unity that outmatched the enemy at every turn. Aiyana moved through the chaos with a calmness that surprised even her. She had found her place among these warriors, and she would protect them with everything she had. The sound of the battle faded into the background as Aiyana focused on her target. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a defender, a protector, and a force to be reckoned with. As the last of the enemy retreated, the tribe gathered around, their victory hard-earned but undeniable. Redstone approached Aiyana, his expression one of quiet pride. "You did well," he said, his voice filled with respect. Aiyana nodded, her heart still racing. "We all did well," she replied. Together, the victory was theirs, but the journey was far from over. Aiyana knew that the land, the tribe, and their way of life would always need protection. But she was no longer just a bystander. She was a warrior, and she would fight for her people until her last breath. As the sun set on the battlefield, the Cherokee gathered to celebrate their victory, but Aiyana knew that this was just the beginning. There would always be more battles to fight, but with Redstone and her tribe at her side, she knew they would face whatever came next as one. The days following the battle were filled with a quiet intensity, as the tribe settled back into their routines, but the weight of the victory lingered in the air. The victory had been hard-earned, but it was not without cost. The tribe had lost warriors, and there was a lingering sense of unease. Redstone, ever vigilant, had not let his guard down for a second. The enemy had been pushed back, but they were not gone, and he knew it would only be a matter of time before they returned. Aiyana, however, felt different now. She had fought alongside her people, and though the victory was sweet, it had solidified something deeper within her. She had found her purpose, and it was no longer about surviving. It was about protecting the land and the people who had become her family. As the days passed, the tribe began to rebuild, reinforcing their defenses, ensuring that the enemy would not return to find them unprepared. Aiyana worked alongside the others, repairing broken structures, gathering supplies, and learning new skills. There was no time to rest. The peace they had fought for was fragile, and they knew that the next battle could come at any time. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Redstone called Aiyana aside. He was standing at the edge of the camp, his eyes fixed on the distance, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. "We need to be ready for what comes next," he said, his voice low but steady. "The enemy may retreat, but they will not forget. And when they return, we will need to be stronger than before." Aiyana nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. "We will be ready," she replied, her voice firm. She had come a long way since the first day Redstone had found her in the mud. Now, she was a warrior, one of the tribe, and she would do whatever it took to protect her people. Over the following weeks, Aiyana's role in the tribe grew. She became an essential part of their strategy, using her knowledge of the land and her sharp instincts to help them anticipate the movements of the enemy. She trained tirelessly, her skills with the bow improving by the day. But more than that, she began to learn the art of leadership. Redstone recognized her potential, and he began to teach her not just the ways of war, but the responsibilities that came with it. He taught her how to read people, how to rally the tribe, and how to make the hard decisions that would ensure their survival. Aiyana absorbed everything he taught her, knowing that the time would come when she would have to step up and lead. She was no longer just a follower. She was a leader in her own right. One evening, as the tribe gathered around the fire, Aiyana found herself standing at the front, the weight of her new role settling over her. She looked out at the faces of the men and women who had fought by her side, the warriors who had become her family. They were strong, but they were tired. They needed direction, and Aiyana knew that she could give it to them. As the fire crackled in the silence, she stepped forward. "We have fought hard to protect our land, and we will continue to fight for it," she said, her voice steady and clear. "The enemy may think they have beaten us, but they are wrong. We are stronger than they know, and we will not stop fighting until we have secured a future for our people." The tribe listened in silence, their eyes fixed on her. Aiyana's words were simple, but they carried a power that resonated deep within them. She had found her voice, and with it, she had found her place. Redstone watched from the edge of the firelight, a proud smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Aiyana had come a long way since the day he had found her in the mud. She had proven herself in every way, and now, she was ready for whatever came next. The tribe, too, had come a long way. They had fought, they had survived, and they had grown stronger together. But the road ahead would not be easy. The enemy was still out there, and their thirst for revenge had not been quenched. The tribe would need to stay vigilant, to continue to grow stronger, and to stand united in the face of whatever challenges lay ahead. But for Aiyana, that was not a burden, it was a calling. She was no longer the woman who had been cast aside. She was no longer the woman left in the mud. She was a warrior, a leader, and she would protect her people with everything she had. The night grew deeper, and the fire crackled as the tribe sat in silence. They were ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And Aiyana knew, deep in her heart, that they would not just survive, they would thrive. The days that followed were filled with a sense of anticipation. The tribe had settled into a routine, but the looming threat of the enemy's return hung in the air like a storm cloud, waiting to break. Aiyana could feel the tension in the camp, the quiet murmurs of the warriors as they prepared for the inevitable. Each warrior, each member of the tribe, knew their role. Redstone had taken charge of the strategy, his eyes always scanning the horizon for signs of movement, while Aiyana worked tirelessly alongside him, ensuring the defenses were in place. Her skills with the bow were now unmatched, but it was her ability to read the land and anticipate the enemy's next move that made her invaluable to the tribe. She had become more than just a survivor. She had become a leader. But even with all the preparations, even with all their strength, the waiting was the hardest part. Aiyana found herself lying awake at night, her thoughts racing. She could hear the wind rustling through the trees, the soft sounds of the camp settling into silence, but her mind refused to quiet. She had seen what the enemy was capable of. She had fought beside the tribe, and she knew the cost of their survival. She was no longer the woman who had been abandoned in the mud. She had fought for her place here. But with that fight had come responsibility. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the tribe, for her new family. One night, as the moon hung high above the camp, Aiyana found herself alone by the fire, her bow resting beside her. The flames crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across her face as she stared into the fire, lost in thought. The weight of what was to come pressed heavily on her chest. She didn't fear the fight itself. She had faced that many times before. What scared her was the uncertainty, the unknown. She had seen the brutality of the enemy, the way they had come for her once before, and she knew that they would stop at nothing to destroy them. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You are ready." Aiyana turned to see Redstone standing in the shadows, his silhouette outlined by the firelight. His voice was calm, reassuring, but there was a depth of understanding in it that made her pause. He knew what she was feeling. "I don't know if I am," Aiyana said quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've never had to lead before." Redstone stepped closer, his gaze steady as he looked at her. "You have led every day since you joined us. It is not the title that makes you a leader, it is your actions. And your actions have already proven that you are one of us. Aiyana met his gaze, and for the first time, she saw in his eyes the same respect that the tribe had shown her. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a protector, and she had earned her place among them. "We fight tomorrow," Redstone said, his voice low but filled with purpose. "But tonight, we rest. Tonight, we remember why we fight." Aiyana nodded, her heart settling slightly at his words. She wasn't alone in this fight. They were all in this together. The next day dawned cold and clear, the sky a sharp blue as the tribe gathered to make their final preparations. The enemy had been spotted on the horizon, their numbers as vast as the rumors had promised. But the tribe was ready. They had fought together before, and they would do so again. Aiyana stood at the front of the group, her bow drawn, her stance strong. Redstone was beside her, his eyes scanning the distance as he gave final orders to the warriors. "Remember," he said, his voice cutting through the silence of the camp. "We fight for each other. We fight for our land. We fight because we are stronger together." The warriors nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They knew what was at stake. Aiyana stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest as she glanced at the tribe. They were ready. The time had come. As the enemy approached, the battle began with a fury, the clash of steel and the whizzing of arrows filling the air. Aiyana moved through the chaos, her movements precise and deliberate. Her bow was an extension of herself, each arrow finding its mark with deadly accuracy. Redstone fought beside her, his presence a steadying force as they moved through the battlefield together. The tribe held its ground, their unity unshakable. The enemy, once so confident in their superiority, began to falter under the relentless assault of the Cherokee. Aiyana's heart raced as she fought, but there was no fear in her. She was no longer fighting for survival. She was fighting for something greater. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the battle reached its climax. The enemy, overwhelmed by the strength and unity of the tribe, began to retreat, their morale shattered. The tribe had won again, but the victory felt different this time. It wasn't just about survival. It was about the future. The tribe had proven that they were not just warriors. They were a family, bound together by their shared struggle, by their love for the land they called home. Aiyana lowered her bow, her breath steady, but her heart still racing from the battle. Redstone approached her, his eyes filled with pride. "You did it," he said quietly. Aiyana looked at him, her gaze filled with gratitude. "We did it," she corrected. Redstone smiled, the weight of the victory settling over them both. The battle was over, but the fight for their future had only just begun. The days following the battle were filled with a quiet kind of tension. Though the enemy had been driven back, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that they would regroup. Redstone had called the tribe to action, but this time, the stakes were higher. They had won the last battle, but the war was not over. The enemy was relentless, and their desire for revenge would not be easily quenched. Aiyana, now more than just a survivor, felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. She had proven herself in the heat of battle, but this time, she was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her people. Every day, she trained harder, sharpening her skills with the bow and learning the finer points of strategy from Redstone. His words echoed in her mind. "We fight as one. We protect each other." As the tribe prepared for whatever the enemy would throw at them next, Aiyana found herself growing stronger, more confident. She no longer doubted her place among them. But there were moments, brief flashes of doubt, when she wondered if she was ready for the weight of the decisions that lay ahead. The enemy would come again, and the tribe needed to be prepared, not just physically, but mentally. Redstone had taught her that in battle, strength alone was not enough. It was unity, determination, and a shared vision that would see them through. One evening, as the sun began to set, Aiyana stood at the edge of the camp, looking out over the land they had fought so hard to protect. The wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the first stars beginning to twinkle overhead. Aiyana could feel the pulse of the land beneath her feet, the same land that had once been a source of pain, but now felt like home. It was a strange feeling, being so connected to a place. For so long, she had been an outsider, drifting from one place to the next, never really belonging anywhere. But here, With the Cherokee, she had found something real. She had found family. She had found purpose. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Redstone approaching, his face serious but his eyes kind. "You're ready," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of his years of experience. Aiyana looked at him, the firelight flickering in her eyes. "I don't know if I am," she admitted, her voice quieter than she intended. "I've never had to make decisions like this before. What if I fail?" Redstone stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We all have doubts," he said, his tone steady. "But we don't let them control us. You've already proven that you're ready. You've earned your place here, and the tribe will follow you because they trust you. And I trust you." Aiyana felt a weight lift from her chest at his words. She had been struggling with the responsibility of leadership, but in that moment, she realized that it was not something she had to carry alone. She had the support of her people, and together, they could face whatever came next. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm now. "I won't let you down." Redstone smiled slightly, the corners of his mouth lifting in a rare expression of warmth. "I know you won't," he said, his voice full of quiet pride. "Now we prepare. The enemy will come soon, and we will be ready for them." The next few days were spent in focused preparation. The tribe worked together, reinforcing their defenses, sharpening their weapons, and ensuring they had everything they needed for the fight ahead. Aiyana felt the urgency in the air, but she also felt a sense of calm. This time, they would not be caught off guard. This time, they would fight as one, and they would protect each other. When the day of the next battle arrived, the tribe stood together, ready. The enemy had underestimated them once before, but they would not make the same mistake again. The sun hung high in the sky, the heat of the day oppressive, but the tribe remained unshaken. Redstone stood at the front, his eyes scanning the horizon, his body tense with anticipation. Aiyana stood beside him, her bow in hand, her body poised and ready. The wind carried the faint sound of hooves in the distance, and she knew that the enemy was close. As the first riders appeared on the horizon, the tribe moved as one, their movements fluid and coordinated. Aiyana's heart raced as she notched an arrow, her eyes fixed on her target. She let the arrow fly, watching as it struck its mark. The battle was fierce, but the tribe fought with a strength born of unity. Aiyana moved through the chaos, her focus unwavering, her heart set on protecting the land and the people she had come to love. The enemy was pushed back, their retreat swift and desperate, and the tribe stood victorious once more. But as the dust settled and the tribe gathered to assess the damage, Aiyana knew that this victory, like the last, was only temporary. The fight would continue, and the enemy would return. But with Redstone and her people by her side, Aiyana knew they would be ready. The tribe had been tested, but they had proven that they were stronger than any enemy. They had faced the darkness together, and together, they would face whatever came next. The victory was hard-won, but there was no time to rest. The battle had left the tribe with casualties, and though the enemy had been pushed back once again, there was still the sense of a looming threat. The days following the battle were filled with a quiet tension, as the tribe began to heal and regroup. Redstone, ever vigilant, kept his eye on the horizon, knowing that the enemy would not relent. They had learned the tribe's strength, but they had also learned their own weaknesses. They would return, and when they did, they would be more dangerous than before. Aiyana felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier with each passing day. She had earned her place among the tribe, but with that place came the knowledge that the fight was far from over. She had proven herself as a warrior, but now she had to prove herself as a leader. Redstone had shown her the way, but it was time for her to find her own path. The morning after the battle, Redstone called Aiyana aside. "It's time," he said, his voice steady, though there was a sharp edge to it. "The enemy will come soon. We must prepare, but we must also be smart." Aiyana nodded, her mind already turning over the possibilities. She had learned from Redstone the importance of strategy, of knowing when to fight and when to wait. This time, the tribe would not charge into battle recklessly. They would make their stand on their own terms. Over the next few days, the tribe moved in silence, preparing for what was to come. The warriors trained, the women gathered supplies, and the elders held council. Aiyana stood beside Redstone, watching as he gave orders, coordinating the tribe's efforts with precision. She had learned so much from him, But now it was her turn to take charge. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Aiyana found herself standing at the edge of the camp, looking out over the land they had fought so hard to protect. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the air cool and crisp. The land stretched before her, wild and untamed, but it was theirs. The thought filled her with a sense of purpose, but also a sense of foreboding. She knew the enemy would not stop. They had seen the strength of the tribe, and they would come for it. But Aiyana was ready. She had seen what they were capable of. She had seen what it took to survive, and she knew that they could fight back. Redstone approached her, his footsteps soft on the earth. "You are ready," he said quietly, standing beside her. Aiyana turned to face him, her eyes steady. "I won't let you down," she said. "I won't let the tribe down." Redstone nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I know. But remember, it's not just about fighting. It's about protecting what's ours. The land, the people, the future. We fight not just to survive, but to thrive." Aiyana looked out at the tribe, gathered around the fire, their faces lit by the flickering flames. She could see the strength in their eyes, the resolve in their movements. They were ready, and so was she. The next morning, the tribe gathered at the edge of the camp, ready for the fight ahead. Redstone gave the signal, and they moved out, their steps synchronized, their minds focused on the task at hand. Aiyana stood at the front, her bow drawn, her heart steady. The enemy had arrived, and they were ready. The battle was brutal, the sounds of arrows and war cries echoing across the land. Aiyana moved with the tribe, her arrows finding their mark with deadly precision. She could hear the cries of the enemy as they fell, but there was no time to dwell on it. She had a job to do. The tribe fought with the strength of their unity, each member standing shoulder to shoulder, their movements fluid and precise. Redstone led them with a calm intensity, guiding them through the chaos with the wisdom of years of battle. Aiyana was no longer just a warrior. She was a leader, and she fought beside her people with everything she had. The battle raged on, but slowly, the tide began to turn. The enemy, overwhelmed by the tribe's strength and unity, began to retreat. Aiyana felt the shift in the air, the weight of victory settling over them like a heavy cloak. The enemy was not as strong as they had once seemed, and they would not be back. As the last of the enemy retreated, Redstone looked around at the tribe. They had won, but the cost was still high. The battle had taken its toll, but they had survived, and they had done it together. Aiyana looked around at the faces of the warriors, the men and women who had fought beside her. They were tired, but they were victorious. The tribe had proven that they were stronger than any enemy. They had stood together, and they had fought for each other. As the tribe gathered around the fire that night, Aiyana felt the weight of the victory settle over her. She had led them, and they had followed. She was no longer just a warrior. She was a leader, and the future was theirs to shape. The land was theirs, and together, they would protect it. The days after the final battle were filled with both quiet reflection and preparation for the future. The enemy had been driven back, and the tribe had won a hard-fought victory, but the cost had been high. Many warriors were injured, and the reminder of their struggles was felt by everyone. Yet despite the toll, there was a quiet peace settling over the camp, a sense that, at least for now, the tribe was safe. The unity they had fought for had been cemented by their actions. Aiyana stood by the fire, watching the flames dance in the cool evening air. Her bow was resting beside her, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the familiar wood. The sound of the crackling fire seemed to echo the thoughts in her mind. She had come so far from the woman she once was, the woman who had been abandoned and left to die in the mud. Now, she was a warrior, a leader, and a protector of her people. But what came next? The battle had been won, but the road ahead was still uncertain. The tribe was stronger, yes, but there would always be more challenges to face, more battles to fight. Redstone approached her, his presence calm but powerful as ever. He stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the fire. "You've done well," he said, his voice steady. Aiyana didn't look at him immediately, but she nodded slowly. "We've all done well," she replied quietly. "We fought together." Redstone glanced at her, a rare smile flickering on his lips. "Yes, we did. But you led us, Aiyana. You found strength when none of us thought we could." Aiyana felt a warmth spread through her at his words, but there was still a part of her that didn't quite believe it. I didn't lead alone, she said. You were with me. The tribe was with me. Redstone nodded. That's true, but you led them in the way only you could. And that's what makes a leader. Not the ones who stand in front, but the ones who give others the strength to stand with them. The words lingered in the air, and Aiyana's heart swelled with something that was part gratitude, part realization. She had not been just following Redstone's example. She had created her own path, one that was rooted in the same values the tribe held dear. She had done it for them, for herself, for the land they had fought to protect. I'm not afraid anymore, Aiyana said softly, turning her gaze to the horizon. Not of what's coming, not of what I'll have to face. I'm ready to lead. I'm ready to protect them, to protect this land. Redstone's expression softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of trust and respect. I knew you would be, he said. You found your place here, Aiyana. And no matter what comes next, you'll face it as a warrior, as a leader, as one of us. The tribe began to gather around the fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering light, each one silently acknowledging the role they had played in their shared victory. Their unity was not just the result of battle. It was the result of their shared struggles, their shared love for the land and the future they had fought to build. The enemy had underestimated them. They had thought they could break them, that they could take their land, their spirit. But the tribe had shown them that they were not so easily defeated. They would fight to protect each other, to protect what was theirs, no matter the cost. Aiyana looked at the faces of the men and women around her. They were not just survivors. They were warriors, protectors, and most importantly, a family. And she was proud to be a part of it. The fire crackled, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees filling the night air. Aiyana felt a sense of peace, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. She wasn't just a warrior anymore. She was a part of something larger than herself, a part of a tribe that would stand together, no matter the challenges. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Aiyana knew that she would not face it alone. She was not just protecting the land. She was protecting the people who had become her family. The night deepened, and the tribe settled into a quiet calm. The battle had been fought, but the fight for their future was ongoing. Aiyana knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready. The tribe had come through the storm together, and they would continue to stand strong, side by side, for as long as they needed. Aiyana had found her place, and with that, she had found peace. The land was theirs, and no one would take it from them. Together, they would fight for it, and together, they would thrive. In this gripping tale, follow the journey of Aiyana, a woman who transforms from a victim into a fierce protector, as she becomes part of a Cherokee tribe that faces fierce battles to survive. With each passing challenge, Aiyana proves herself not only as a warrior but also as a leader, gaining the trust and respect of those around her. The tribe fights together to protect their land, overcoming enemies and internal struggles along the way. This is one of the many powerful Western stories where resilience, unity, and the spirit of survival shine through. The tribe's battle for survival is fierce, but Aiyana's journey shows what it means to rise above adversity and fight for something bigger than yourself. As Aiyana fights for her new family and the land they call home, her story weaves itself into the fabric of Western stories that capture the essence of perseverance, strength, and the human spirit. In this tale, readers will find themselves drawn into the world of Western stories where battles are fought not just with weapons, but with the heart and soul of those who believe in the fight for justice. Aiyana's leadership and courage become central to her tribe's future, echoing the timeless themes found in Western stories that celebrate survival, growth, and the fight for freedom. This story, like many great Western stories, proves that no matter how difficult the journey, the strength of a community and the resolve of an individual can turn the tide of fate.